asem baby Daniel fancy. President Mahama be ye mampeni part 1. Ibrahim Mahama first jet no jata number 1 or 2012. Or 2012 na President Mahama eye mampeni wo Ghana ha. And to Ibrahim the presidential jet, the private jet first one. And na wasan top private jet second one, abra ni nua eye mampeni part 2. And na yenim say private jet na ba bedru Ghana ha. It on the abra ni nua be mampeni bia no. And what top private jet. Yes, we acknowledge. Yes, we acknowledge the fact that or your businessman, we acknowledge the fact that we are Kenya Obi. No more Asema Mekan say we acknowledge the fact that Absa Bank fund the financier, but Asema Mekan say it is also true. Sending your man penny be on top private jet. 2012 your man penny no top private jet. And it is again also true. Says a Ghana koto helicopter and I say a Mushembia and you no so to private jet. 2012. Martin Amidu, no ye former Attorney General of the government. A true article, say President Mills in 2011, no per se investigative president, Vice President Mahama, say Tama no lead the negotiations between Ghana and the baby and Yakoto helicopter ama Air Force for no. Almost suggested say negotiations ni bi wo honoma President Mahama and exercise good judgment. Now on my personal interest, these are negotiations no enim kind. Obi, with your kind permission, I will just read
every contractor. If a woman and as August 6 disaster is seen. In fact, before then, now Air Force, how many other units within the army, and then crack or die National Security Council and a cabinet. Omoka say we here say you better if you share what the Air Force. Omoka for helicopters be one sem. And Omoka say for a year presidential jet communication squad on managing. The also see and because of frequent breakdown. The wopa one san Kaisa say to me say 8 months na fe na aba. And na say the BIA call repair ni aba no no e was slow to maintain. After so enya reliable won't me fin 2.10 and for we need to say the could you assign the waba. And then there are safety issues because of the frequent breakdowns. In the almost to say it is more cost effective to buy a new one. So that in the long run, no, and no will guarantee operational efficiency. They be with here on Sabeka because there are improvements on the technology. A bit medium and Peniaco baby aba. Tawangan is another commercial, it has its inconveniences, and the local rent here it is far more expensive. Tene o mampeni akufa do yeno no. And a cabinet G2, yeah, they call parliament, it was debated. For the avoidance of doubt, minority did not oppose the purchase of the presidential jet. And I would be
yes.
They argued the debate, many debates maybe. But they did not vote against the purchase of the presidential jet. It is a matter of record. Because they were convinced about the merits of the purchase of the presidential jet. But presidential jet, no, said the idea a workshop I will cotton and said cotton is too maba. It's for formal. It must be built from scratch. It won't go so I or more. In Tia and say Yamea do maybe I enter say I think on the and I say I feel for a Simono assassino, Yan Sabeka. And then I say no more day fares a look of tabai. Air Force for receiving ya Omudidu Mujuma. But in between Tama, Ta play the baba and Yano, and some penny to one. It was saying on the set of that time Ghana Fusika, Ediaco rented jets and the board. When we have several competing needs, if he will use an option that is much cheaper, if you need me our jets, Obi Ibrahim, Sergeant no say last 2024, not Mampeni. In fact, in opposition, no Mampeni used Jata jet Dadano to do his external travels, sometimes internal travels. If any the Fufra will be him, and I say, Sergeant me available there, let me use it and avoid the cost that was raw. Many who said may in care. It is a Mampeni. So I do not want to burden the people of Ghana with excessive cost. But now I need the Western. But this is a binomial conflict of interest. Obi, is the end before. What can I say? In the deep recesses of their libido, because of in the year na Bemunti, almost finance minister Kenofoyata, and awarding the whole contract contract bonds or receiving about 150 million Ghana cedis in payment for data bank. And also they are desperate for equalization. And you know where none exists, almost there is. The only way there will be conflict of interest, let's say Ibrahim Mahama, why rent just maybe Ibrahim Mahama home. Because to allege conflict of interest, you must state the interest that conflicts. Where is the conflict? Or maintain per jet, now or the Ghana seeker or rent it. Now a bill or now or terms can the command in renting the jet, and that is where there is conflict of interest. The interest is the state's payment for a jet, and the fact that NIPA or render service no or maintaining your interest will move because when you wish you near in India. But in this instance, Nimia at the jet nothing Obi. Tell me a minister Meboa. You see a man official car, and as a man official car pool. Now and of family sorry na me ko edwuma na me tu na enyi so. Na me tu minia car e de ko edwuma. Boni a e de bebre aban ana o ha we won de won no e de won ka tell me Obi.
Yeah, but would that not be a simplistic way of looking at the issue?
No, that's but the same thing. O man tani tu kwan. Ohia jet. Minia will be and a wafem edeko. Say otam Ghana sika top as all rent jet. And I knew I said media and rent to the rent here. That is where there's an issue. Now said you on my man as on my penny ya a bebwama or my name waka or better as a mempe. On my penny mama stays or war position and no say Ghana for say. Or no ya. On my penny, I go for the day, yeah, no more book a boo Ghana for share. There was a year by the third quarter of the year, I think 2018 or so. Now, my penny, Akufo-Addo, now going to Nkwano, it had cost the taxpayer 68 million Ghana cedis. Just first 3 quarters of the year. And see, on my penny, Mama say, we must avoid that. If there are alternative ways, a work for my bit medium Makwaba Jojoa, I will exploit. In fact, was also INA which testifies to the fact that he wants to reduce the cost to the state in terms of maintaining a memo any abandon here. Was there not a time in this country now you were 123 ministers and President Akufo-Addo? Mama Shebo so be 60 and now you were 58. Presidential staff list, presidential staffer. Na any man penny adwuma e wo man penny asoye under President Akufo-Addo around 2018 this time na omoye 361 obi in addition to 123 ministers man penny Mahama ene am say in the coming days no the list no be call parliament was so by about 130 obi ne ya appointed me first no I ma me appointment letter no na appointment letter ya show mo say Yabema me fuel na watching the Omantoni Mama, despite that provision in my appointment letter, no, was a pen you chum. You move be anywhere, ya jet fuel 58 in the hole. Ya to your fuel. DSCBC were cancelled. And in fact, even travels of ministers, any CEOs, in the end, now what you are day whereby I say, or reminded board members said they are not entitled to travel without recourse to permission from chief of staff. And Wabani first class travel. Or see minister be anywhere which may travel first class. Abino, Ejinimu, and also the money to first class. You are restricted to business class. Who you see you are restricted to economic class. I just said be a wild to seek an air. So he has done all of this to demonstrate. So unlike the MPP, let's say here, Ayo Mode, I know to Roman Penny Akufo-Addo tam $18,000 an hour called rent high end presidential jets no and private jets for travels no on your side. And see about the saying and I entered before it to me solid said they have been vindicated. Yeme Pacho na yaye bibi ebi mada.
Okay, Felix.
Some of it may say
yes.
To tell me, say a president who is working to reduce the cost to the taxpayer, is simply not tenable. And you know credit.
Felix, 2 questions. First one, on the status of the presidential jet na yenim say say President Mahama eba no the first few months what they call Tanzania now what flight needs to be eba ya na a develop a fault. One of the concerns and as issues among for raising and it's just 4 months 5 months prior we're told said that presidential jet was in pristine condition. How could such a jet develop a fault acquire really beyond repair? What's he saying? President Barry rely on private. I know your first point. Yeah, no,
okay. Yes. All right, Martin.
Yeah, no, enough for me, Musa, the next
okay. So 4 months prior, no. You know, say President Akufo-Addo the subject number upon we are President upon we of Liberia. I mean, 2 coin. If it was not in pristine condition at the time, President upon we are a whole president of the country would be 2 coin. But yes, I didn't know, and no mum far private jet 82 coin. So he gave the presidential jet out to another president to travel, and then took $18,000 an hour to rent a private jet to travel. If people criticize Sadiana, the Omudika was fit for purpose. Nothing, it is not fit for purpose. And it is a machine. It can break down at any time. And now, in fact, the reporter, Air Force, what they break cabinet. In their own words, almost it is an aging aircraft. It can break down periodically. In fact, go back to January 2025. January 2025, Dominic Mutu, defense minister and President Akufo-Addo. Now, almost power just a few days. Muto Odina Parliament said the aircraft was in pristine condition and it was their own confession and testimony.
Yeah, but they told you then, I remember, sir, it was not okay for long haul flight, but say a short haul within Africa, but you didn't agree with them.
No, but and yet he wasn't taking it on, and it's not even true. He could even go to Europe, because there was a time I called France, and also from France to Belgium, and President Akufo-Addo. So it is not true, say, he couldn't go to Europe. Of course, you cannot do a 15-hour flight. A layover.
FM.
But half of the time, now Dominic will as immediate past defense minister. No, it was in good condition. If it was not in good condition, I think I am going Kenya, Angola, and Tanzania. It's in my head and allow wrongdoers. Nipa ayo minor bonnet. I say o man sika, I sure man sika any to come and pretend that they've been vindicated. They have not been vindicated. Nobody can be vindicated for waste. At the same time, I know I'm telling Akufo-Addo, aircraft. We were in the middle of our worst economic crisis. And I'm for there's a Ghana Fiscal Service report. I say 8.5 million Ghanaians. That is a quarter of our population. In 2022 to 2023. That was the time I know my penny was renting aircraft at this price. So anybody who condemned him was right to condemn him.
Felix,
that is not how to run the country. For the avoidance of doubt, and rent private aircraft. So you say, rent private aircraft at the cost of President Akufo-Addo. Then you can talk about vindication. But he has not rented one.
Okay.
He has had one for free. And I was airborne incidental cost to do travels from Ninia.
Okay. But Felix, in the interest
of commercial aircraft, in fact, Obi, you are the best witness because you raised the concern on this matter.
That's true. I remember.
Exactly.
I remember. But in the interest of transparency, would you tell the Ghanaian people how much we spend on using the president brother's plane?
Obi,
catch the Ghana for
Obi, we are logic simple. We rent aircraft. It is more expensive than just fueling an existing aircraft.
Yeah, I know that. But would you tell Ghanaians how much it is?
They are reporting on the budget, sir.
Yes.
They state how much the president's travel costs. And yet, public information. So, they are asking it for mischievous purposes only. Otherwise, 1 + 1 is equal to 2. Say, we rent aircraft. It is certainly more expensive than just fueling it.
But what can fueling waka landing right because ubetria when the plane is parked on the tarmac, waka incidental cost. I don't know who takes care of.
That is cheaper than rent because we rent here. You still pay for fuel, you still pay for landing rights, you still bear the cost of the pilot.
No. I agree. I'm saying, sir.
It's okay. See, there's a figure. I am telling you as a matter of certainty, so it will be cheaper. And I'm giving you the logic behind that. When rent here, you pay for renting it. You will pay for fuel. You will pay for landing rights. You will pay incidental costs. If you get the plane for free, you will pay for fuel, landing rights, and incidental costs. So which one will be more expensive?
Yeah, one obviously will be expensive. Sir.
Absolutely.
So, rental now.
Until say anybody can claim. Say it is more expensive to get the aircraft for free, fuel it, and pay incidental costs than renting it and paying for rent, paying for fuel, paying for incidental costs, and other costs like landing rights. So it is a straightforward argument. But as for the accounting for the use of money for presidential travel, it is contained in the budget report. And what you know, or maintaining a kufuado, 68 million for 3 quarters, no, at the council of Ghana. So, and yes, you must. You understand the point I'm making? So let nobody think say you must mean there's no basis for that comparison to begin with. Say you won't even ask that question, not you, I mean. But say if you are not intended on mischief, it is so straightforward. So you won't even begin to argue. Say the Omampeni man to see no a boy and Cassidy not President Akufo-Addo, you know. And at the final point I'm better to say there are some claiming say you sue Ibrahim Mahama jet there, then Ibrahim Mahama will get a benefit. Obi Abraham Omampeni Mahama a war position or use Ibrahim jet no, did he get any benefit? And secondly, the Omampeni Mahama does he need Ibrahim Mahama to give him the jet before favoring him as his brother if what people are claiming is even to be agreed upon? Say or you need me. So I just will use the jet as a Wabuano. So some of the claims they are making, they defy logic. But guilt from the condemnation they came under, and nobody prepare pay equalization. It's not more cancer more. Otherwise, this is very straightforward and clear. And indeed, President Mahama deserves commendation for choosing an option that spares us waste. Before and indeed, before put their waste was not just limited to aircraft. Everything about them was wasteful. $90 million. At the time, we have such economic difficulty.
Let me read this short paragraph of an article journalist Manasseh Azuri-Awini Etroye published today. And one of the people publicly criticizing, the president traveling with his brother's jet. Or say, the guidelines on conflict of interest published by Shraj identified 3 kinds of conflict of interest: actual, potential, and apparent, into bracket, perceived. This means a public official can be found guilty of a conflict of interest even if the conflict is not proven to have occurred. According to Shraj, an actual conflict of interest occurs when a public officer's private engagement compromises or her judgment or objectivity in the public office. In the context of a potential conflict of interest, the present action may not have put the public officer in a conflict of interest, but it creates the conditions for such a conflict to occur. Here is how the 3rd kind of conflict of interest, apparent or perceived, occurs. Imagine applying for a mining concession or bidding for a government contract, hoping to win. Unfortunately, you lose. But the person whose company wins the deal is the businessman whose private jet the President of the Republic travels on. The ministers who supervise the procurement process are appointed by the President and may have traveled on the private jet owned by the winner of the government contract. Even if this businessman won the contract with a superior bid, would it be wrong to tinker with the perception that the government is simply returning the favor done by the private jet owner? Does this make sense to you, Felix?
First of all, you're a lawyer. You know that you're for conflict of interest.
Sure.
What is it?
When you are part of the decision making, you recuse yourself when
you
such
should declare
a decision.
Your interest.
Yeah, and you declare your interest and you recuse yourself.
No,
if you
and
have
to.
If it becomes necessary, you have to.
No, you declare your interest. Say, my interest. So it is up to those you are taking the decision away to decide whether, despite that, they should go ahead. So the cure for conflict of interest.
But you are saying, sir, you declare your interest and you sit in the decision making.
You see,
Okay.
You have far-fetched extrapolations.
Yes.
My next action, no.
Yes.
It is a far-fetched extrapolation. We see in Yayan Kebeye. You must prove it. The analogy you gave about award of a mining lease.
Yes.
You must prove it. The president's brother at the time of the application did not qualify, and that there was some tinkering. You must prove it. You can't say it merely because, in fact, as for in the recent passport year, there was a finance minister or a president in here. On it, he awarded the thing to himself. You see, he was a finance minister, now also raise the bonds. And then he picked his company to advise him to raise the bonds. No, she and the company. It happened under this, in this country, under MPP, those who are making noise now. It happened, what was their response at the time? I said, I know you've been on the mind. The finance minister, or your man, and also raise the bonds. One of the book runners was Data Bank. Who, in fact, finance minister went to parliament. He decided a question. There is a winning MP. He decided a question. How much did bond raising cost in terms of payment to the book runners? On one end, figures for the parliament took up 150 million. That is what Data Bank got for advising their founder and owner on raising bonds. Ibrahim Mahama, his business dealings are well known. Or your business that